Take a moment to sit back and think. What game comes to mind when you think of Mega Man on the NES? Most gamers think of Mega Man 2, which seems to be the most popular. Some may even think of Mega Man 3, but the general consensus seems to be that 2 is the most popular on the NES. I, however, have only owned the original Mega Man since childhood. Only later acquiring the second and third. I've played parts of the others on the NES, and I own Anniversary Collection on the PS2. But for 27 or 28 years now, my main Mega Man experience has been with the original. If you're familiar with Mega Man, and I'm actually not sure why you wouldn't be, you know the score. The game starts out with a stage select screen allowing players to choose which out of the 6 playable stages they want to play first. This was actually a pretty unique design choice for its time, but is the classic formula Mega Man has used since 1987. Beating a stage boss allows Mega Man, gaming's original identity thief, to use that boss's special attack in-game, and each boss is weak to another boss's attack. Figuring out which boss's ability defeats the other bosses was all part of the fun and strategy of the game. The original Mega Man is a classic example of why we still love NES games to this day. Cool concept, well thought out level designs, perfect controls, and finesse style gameplay requiring both memorization and perfect timing, all combined to give us that classic feel of the NES at its finest. Each level in the game has its own unique theme, centered around the boss at the end of the level, and each level is also completely unique, presenting its own set of challenges, design theory, and some level-specific enemies. Bomb Man stage, for example, is pretty straightforward. You move from left to right most of the stage, going up here and there as needed. Whereas Elect Man stage has you seemingly climbing up most of the stage, as if you're climbing up a mountain of electrical junk to meet the boss at the very top. Each stage is unique on its own and filled with their own set of stage obstacles, like those dreaded moving blocks, or a tough jumping scene where one misstep can be instant death, and their own set of enemies, some requiring their own precise timing with which to dispatch them. The levels are that classic NES combination of well thought out design and tough gameplay elements that keeps you coming back for more. Mega Man moves fast, controls well, and has a good combination of twitch gunplay mixed with precarious level designs, which creates an overall feeling of excitement and danger. As a kid, I would usually start in Cut Man stage, because he was the easiest for me to beat with default Mega Man. After that, I would either try Elect Man stage or Bomb Man stage, but I would always avoid Guts Man stage because those stupid moving platforms were my bane. Not even the moving blocks in Iceman stage or the tough jumping on slippery surfaces haunted me nearly as much as those stupid moving platforms did. This is a game that took me incremental years to get better at, challenging myself to play on to the next stage in order to beat each one, and what a satisfying feeling when I finally learned each level well enough to beat them all. I didn't play this game all the time. I do, however, always put it in my NES whenever I dust the system off, so my skill level grew over many years of playing instead of through straight playing the game over and over again. I remember the satisfying feeling of beating Guts Man stage for the first time, and the feeling of finally being good enough to beat all 6 underbosses to unlock Dr. Wily's stage. However, up until a couple of weeks ago, I would generally shut the game off at this point. All previous attempts to beat Wily's stage ended in frustration and rage quitting on my part. No point in getting angry at a silly little Nintendo game, I would say. However, a couple of weeks ago, I finally decided what the heck. Other people have beaten this game even in front of me. I may suck at games, but dang it, I'm gonna beat this one. And sure enough, after a lot of memorizing, a lot of playing, and a whole lot of cursing, I finally beat Mega Man. After 27 or 28 years of trying, I finally beat this game. Did I spam the heck out of a Lekman special and the select glitch to beat Wily? Absolutely. After almost 3 decades of playing, I don't care. Let me have this victory, okay? Let me finally avenge my childhood. And later, I'll worry about beating Wily in a more legitimate manner. But let me repeat, childhood avenged! Beating a game you could never beat as a kid is awesome. Like making amends with a childhood friend, and then kicking his ass. So why has the original Mega Man been such a hard game for me to finally beat? Outside of the fact that Wily's stage is insanely tough at first, requiring you to fight multiple stage bosses and refight all the previous bosses before finally taking on Wily himself in a Mega Man game that has no E-Tank items to refill your life at will. If I had to compare it to another NES classic, I would compare it to the original Castlevania in terms of difficulty. I'm not comparing them in terms of gameplay difficulty, though Mega Man does share some of the rhythmic timing style gameplay of Castlevania, and even some Medusa head type enemy patterns. Mega Man, however, moves much faster, twitch pace, but a pace that requires the right timing and patience at times. The controls, especially in the jumping department, are so much more fluid feeling and responsive in Mega Man versus Castlevania, making even the most precarious jumping segments feel a lot less difficult. What makes me draw the comparison isn't the fact that Mega Man and Simon Belmont were both characters in Captain N, that ridiculous cartoon in the late 80s I used to watch all the time, or that after you defeat a boss, you collect an orb while trying to strike the coolest pose possible. What makes Mega Man so hard is an issue that, like Castlevania, was rectified in its sequels to make them easier to beat. You have to beat this game in one sitting. Both the original Mega Man and the original Castlevania don't have a password system of any kind. There are no passwords and there are no save states, meaning you have to start from the very beginning every time you power the game on. That is, unless you do a retro save state where you pause the game, turn off your TV, and leave your system on for days in order to finally beat a tough level. Granted, I never did that. I would just shut the game off and come back to it when I felt like playing again. But I had one weirdo friend who would always have his systems paused. The combination of no password system, having to start the game from the beginning every time you play, and no E-Tanks, makes this possibly the hardest Mega Man game in the series. At least that I have played. In playing through Mega Man a couple of times now, I managed to beat it in just over an hour of play. Granted, I die a lot in Wily's stage, so I will eventually shave more time off. But I have found the best pattern to go is Bomb Man, Guts Man, Cuts Man, Elect Man, Ice Man, and Fire Man last. Sometimes I'll start with Cut Man just to change it up. music in Mega Man is well composed and classic NES style. I will say though that I do believe that the music in its sequels is a little better composed and a bit more iconic. The original, however, still has some good tunes. Also unique to the original Mega Man is that Mega Man collects spheres that add to his point tally. Points which do, well, they don't do anything except give you bragging rights as far as I can tell. They don't earn you extra lives, and like Castlevania, Mega Man starts you out with infinite continues, which is also a good motivator to keep you playing. Just one of those strange features they ended up axing for the sequel, and for the better, I would say. The bottom line. Though not as popular as its sequels, the original Mega Man still retains all that NES goodness we've all come to love. Tough and well-designed levels, tight gameplay, smooth controls, and a classical music score. Sometimes rhythmic, sometimes frantic, sometimes so frustratingly hard you'll want to punch a kitten. No kittens were harmed in the making of this video. But all classic, and all satisfying when you finally beat it. By default, I would have to say that this is still my favorite game in the series, because this is the one I have the most fond memories with. If you want to know how Mega Man got its start, give this one a try, and try playing it legit. Come on, no save states. Classic game, and strangely enough, Mega Man was one of those popular NES series that actually managed to avoid the strange curse of number 2. I'm not talking about Dookie, I'm talking Castlevania 2, Mario 2, Zelda 2, and many more that had strange, offsetting sequels that are still controversial to this day.